Greetings, readers and friends. Harvey Michaels here. I'm thrilled to welcome you to our adventure into Danshui, President Plunge, Book 1, Evacuate or Pay. It was an electrifying story to write, and I can't wait to share some with you today. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Your support means the world to me. Thank you kindly. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1, Paul Hu. The raffish grin under his roughly trimmed mustache clashes with anger flashing in his eyes. Lieutenant Foxface Paul Hu is reeling some from the scolding he just got from his short, mostly bald superior who never misses a chance to chew out Officer Hu. This time, Sergeant Bao jumped on him for wearing his Bluetooth earpiece at the table before their typhoon readiness meeting. Never mind that the other staff's phones ping Facebook notices and bidonk line notifications. The middle-aged sergeant does not reprimand any of the others looking at their smartphones. Paul thought he understood his situation well enough. Once Sergeant Bao saw "transferred 2 times" on Paul's police file jacket, in the sergeant's mind, that's all he needed to understand. There was abundant dysfunction to this police precinct boss, more or less a control freak Taipei personality with a child at the wheel. However, years ago, Paul Hu bucked another police department where even bigger problems were denied. He was heroic in the wrong place, at the wrong time, and in the wrong way, which caused great loss to him and his family. Now, gun-shy Paul is in no hurry to confront another superior. I have to keep trying. No matter the sergeant is always showing me a wall, I must find a door there. Paul nods to one of his few mottos. With a compact build of average height and weight, but a much more than average fire in his belly for right and wrong, Paul resumes quietly thinking what he could do about Bali's lack of preparation for this typhoon about to hit them. His eyes are intensely focused on nothing, partially where his fox-face nickname came from. Hands clasped in front of him, Paul mentally lists the highest risk areas in the Bali area. He looks around the room for anyone he thought would be like-minded in figuring risk assessment and contingencies if Bali's infrastructure was swamped. Tidal surge, heavy rain flooding, or super typhoon winds all might cause damage. Can officers foresee where, or will it happen randomly? To Paul's dismay, his co-officers are all lost in whatever indulgence their smartphones are serving up. Discipline is out the window. Still, the sergeant only seems to care about chastising Paul. Sergeant Bao had it in for Paul, borderline obsessed. It wasn't just Paul the outsider transferred from central Taiwan to Taipei 8 years ago, and just 4 months ago to the new Taipei city coastal village of Bali. Paul Hu did everything by the book, and he knew regulations better than Sergeant Bao. That irked the half a head shorter and half a head duller sergeant. Paul, too, was a forward thinker. He was modern, comfortable with technology. These attributes were unwelcome here, though no one said so. Everything about Paul threatened the sergeant, at least in the sergeant's eyes. Then there was the corruption. As far as Paul could tell, it was small time, but everyone was in on it. They did not offer Paul the weekly cash kickback hongbao until he'd been there 2 months. "Suit yourself," they said indifferently when Paul turned it down. Their body language betrayed the concern they tried not to reveal. Corruption in the precinct from doing favors was part of it. Officers were accepting small gratuities for things like parking squad cars outside a bar or a temple when asked. Anyone, not just toddlers in sandboxes, will see how far they can go, testing for boundaries. Funny business started with the sergeant, who had a way of filtering case calls, which sometimes never became cases, through Pee-Pee, his hired switchboard person. He bucked procedure to hire Pee-Pee the same reason he singled out Paul, because he could. Sergeant Bao was also using his position to exert pressure on his staff to spend money on some small arrangements, all supposedly for their benefit, such as discounted employee rates at the designated Japanese restaurant and at the designated mechanic. Paul ignored the pressure to have his wife sign up to sell or at least buy from one of the direct marketing businesses swirling around the department. Also, police officers in this precinct were pressured to get tattoos at a tattoo shop where the sergeant's less than gifted nephew overcharged for oversized tattoos. He guaranteed each tattoo to be unique and artistic, and he specialized in arm and leg whole sleeves. In precinct meetings, almost every arm on the table had the distinctive off-color, thick, and leaking flavor of his garish tats. As with much in the Bali Police Department, the posted time for the typhoon readiness meeting is more a suggestion than an imperative. They are killing time, waiting for the sergeant's assigned typhoon readiness committee leader to print copies. Paul was not petty and did not compare every double standard instance of what life would be like if it were Paul, for example, causing this delay. But he shakes his head all the same at how behind the times this place is, still waiting for paper copies of reports. If anything was important, they should post it on BLPD's private access only website for efficient police business. Oh, that's right, they didn't have any such internet tool or any such modern perspective. Paul wonders to himself for the umpteenth time. How can that be? What can I do about it? An officer comes in with a wad of white paper and a stapler. A few of the several-page reports are already stapled. He gives these to the sergeant and the officers to the right and left of him and sits, stapling the half-wrinkled papers with care that they are straight. Paul could see from across the table that there are no graphs, no maps, and no photos, but it provided several internet links. The sergeant notices none of this, at least not openly. His eyes go from his paper to Paul. Officer Hu, wear long sleeves over those white arms. You will blind us. Sergeant Bao's face contorts downward, displaying an expansive field of shiny forehead skin as he makes his contempt-filled laughing sound. Others laugh along, most of whom did not hear his words, but now understand that the meeting is underway. Paul keeps quiet, smiling and nodding good-naturedly with no cooperation from his eyes. He is regularly chided this way and publicly left the door open to eventually getting a tattoo, though the last thing he would do would be to go to that tattoo parlor. What's the story with you and your naked skin? Why no ink still? One officer asked in last week's meeting. A while back I was thinking about getting a tat, Paul began, and my wife finally went along with the idea too. So what happened? Well, a lot of my reasons for wanting a tat was I wanted to be different, not the same as others. Paul grazed his forearms and then his chest, as if imagining big ink pictures needled in. I realized one summer day at the swimming pool that in some places these days, the guy without a tattoo is the different one. The pictures are art, Foxface. That's the reason to get one. That officer has a tattoo of a parrot with a police hat on his forearm. Maybe I still will, but among professionals, do you know what the most popular tattoo thing is now? Tell us, Mr. Know-It-All. Sergeant Bao was squirming in his seat at the direction of this adult conversation. Paul picked up his coffee cup and looked around before taking a sip and continuing. Getting tattoos taken off. Lasers burn the ink out. Take my word for it, one officer spoke up, slightly tugging his shirt apart between two buttons to show his chest. My wife was threatening to leave me over my big love recipe book tattoo. I am halfway through getting it removed, and it hurts 100 times more than getting a tattoo. His eye twitched, telling the story. Paul listened to him complaining over the past weeks about how painful the process was. I'm afraid that would be me too. Paul nodded at that officer next to him and patted the man's laughing, woven snakes and dinosaur arm sleeve tattoo. Paul shook his head. I doubt myself after big purchase decisions. You know what I mean? I can feel regret after buying a car or maybe someday a home. What a loser. The sergeant killed the conversation like a junior high bully. Sergeant Bao needed to change the subject, and Paul helped. Paul asked the sergeant if he wanted his report on the motion detector lighting security systems the elected Lidang neighborhood representative asked about. The room quieted, and Sergeant Bao was then in a dilemma, taking money from one of the private security patrols nearby. When Paul transferred to this precinct in Bali's less developed coastal area, he expected extra field experience, eventually promotions, but more, he wanted space for his growing young family, where it wasn't all concrete, all urban jungle. Paul thought big city life was fine for everyone except cooped-up children. Where Paul grew up, nature was the rule, urban neighborhoods the exception. He felt children needed lots of open space, not just scattered urban parks. They did best with trees to climb, fireflies to chase, rocks to skip. A police officer works long hours, and a big city cop can't be there to take children out as much as they need. Also, in the Bali area, Paul's family could afford to live in a larger apartment than the tiny place they rented before in downtown Taipei. Paul would have to scrimp and save 10 more years to afford a down payment on a modest Bali apartment. But here, at least, there was hope. There was always hope. That is Paul's favorite line, and his favorite person, his wife. In Taipei, there were better professional opportunities, but the cost to families that weren't rich was too high. Paul questioned a future where house prices remain out of reach. He heard that a generation earlier in Tokyo, banks offered 100-year mortgages, and he wondered if Taipei was coming to that. Some people said to wait, that it was a bubble, and it would pop someday. But Paul saw the same phenomenon around the world. Tokyo, New York, Hong Kong, Singapore, London, every major city's real estate prices had figuratively gone to the moon. The situation seemed entrenched everywhere. It felt foolhardy to imagine Taiwan would lead the way in bringing down out-of-control house prices. It might have tempted Paul to look back to where he came, to less expensive central Taiwan, but he refused. He burned his bridges there when he bucked another precinct. Paul's father had been a cop there too. He died from a heart attack 2 days after the 9/21 earthquake in 1999. Not exactly a role model. He drank too much, never exercised, and ruled the roost with a fearsome temper and the laws of who. Paul's father parented by expressing disappointment in each of his children. Paul was too scrawny, short, and thin growing up before catching up in high school. His younger sisters couldn't sing, couldn't sew, and couldn't cook, according to their father. Paul's father raised his disapproval to new standards, especially for his daughters, each time they reached one of his hurdles. All his children were driven to please him, even after he was gone. The boys emulated what they imagined were his good points, old enough to see his shortcomings and young enough to overlook them. The girls remembered Baba's lap and big smile from the photographs. They became tough as nails to please their father still. Paul and his big brother, a captain in the military police, took care of themselves and didn't drink. His 2 sisters, who could never get paternal approval, married policemen more in the mold of their father. His sisters and their new families reacted harshly and distrusted Paul as much as the police officers in the precinct he filed complaints in 8 years ago. Paul stayed away from central Taiwan for both of the smoldering bridges he left behind. Bali precinct floundered rudderless, ignorant, petty, and immature. They didn't recognize their place in the world, and they were too wrapped up in personal power games to even care. It reflected in their inefficiency. Paul knew if the Bali PD set their mind to it, they could swiftly modernize and adapt. At any rate, eventually it was inevitable. However, the long-reigning sergeant was too intimidated by technology and systems engineering. Paul shook his head, thinking a few hotshot academy graduates assigned the task of brainstorming and pinpointing ways Bali PD was behind the times could handle the job. All across Taiwan, city governments and police departments, schools and public transportation were upgrading at a steady pace. But it was uneven growth. Some were blazing paths into the future, frustrated at being held back. Others had to be dragged, kicking and screaming just to appear to be keeping up. As a result, some departments and institutions were way behind compatible entities. Most public school classrooms had projectors connected to computers to share lessons easily in a 21st century fashion. Some had whiteboards that were giant computer touch screens too, called interactive whiteboards. But there were still some with only chalkboards, where only the teacher was barely plugged into modernity with a single classroom desktop computer. Paul knows his precinct is that school using chalkboards still. It dumbfounds Paul, the stubborn reluctance to modernize, and the other officers going along with Bao's unorthodox and lackadaisical methods. To spin it favorably, Paul supposes Sergeant Bao thinks the smallish 2-story precinct building would be razed or moved within a few years, so any extra effort before then would be a waste. All right, you have your assignments. Everyone look sharp and be ready for anything. Meeting adjourned. Paul saw this coming, but his mouth still falls open, and there is a sinking feeling in his stomach. Water and shorelines surround Bali from its ocean coast to the west and Danshui River to the north. Low tides doubled Bali's exposed landmass, counting the long, muddy stretches of gray sand along the river, which fishing boats float to and park on. Any exceptional tidal surge would inundate places dangerously, and with steep hills against Bali's backside, runoff from heavy rains would compound the predicament. Now, forecasted torrential rain and typhoon winds at high tide will likely spell trouble, even disaster. Paul smooths out his mustache, eyes staring ahead under his furrowed eyebrows. No one here is facing the fact that Super Typhoon Noru could soon reveal catastrophic weaknesses and wreak havoc everywhere. He hurries to leave the precinct and spends no more time dwelling on Bali PD's ignoring the coming danger. Anybody who knows Paul knows he is loyal to a fault. He would rat out no one for their errors. His focus is always on what he could do. After this meeting, however, Paul decides he cannot keep silent. Soon, he will privately confront the sergeant. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the reading this time. Please leave a comment if you did. What did you think? Remember, sharing is caring, so please do tell a friend who would like to join us here. If you are enjoying the journey, I'd be so grateful if you would be a supporter and pick up a copy of Danshui President Plunge on Amazon and leave a review. Until next time, take care. I look forward to seeing you here again. See you then.